Whether it's the uniforms, whether it's the cheerleaders, the beautiful weather in Southern California, just the majestic view of either the LA Coliseum or most notably the Rose Bowl, there is just something a little bit different about USC-UCLA. One of the great rivalries in college football, and probably because of the setting and because of the glamour, the most glamorous of the college football rivalries, and it means a whole bunch for the Pac-12 South Division Championship. We bring in Mike W.R. of Go Joe Bruin to talk up the UCLA side as the Bruins look to win a division and beat arch rival USC for a third consecutive year. Mike, let's talk about this rivalry because I grew up in the Midwest and I still couldn't wait each year to see USC-UCLA, and it's a really nice game this year. And just talk about the unique aspect of this and why Bruins fans get jacked up for this one.
Well, first off, thanks for having me back on again. It's great to be back and talk college football, especially giving you some West Coast football insight. But I am a UCLA alum, and the thing about this rivalry, you have your Ohio State, Michigan, Florida versus Florida State versus Miami. Those are all big rivalries. But what makes this big is that both schools are in the same city, separated. Excuse me. They're only separated by about 11 miles, and so year-round there's a constant reminder that Trojans walking around glaring at Bruins, and Bruins doing the same thing. So they're in your face. They have that basketball rivalry out in Tobacco Road where the three schools are within 12 miles, I think that is, and that's pretty fierce too. That's pretty close, but there's just something about the UCLA-USC rivalry. I actually got to talk to a football player earlier this week, and he talks about how it's one of the best rivalries, and just because of what's at stake, especially this for this game, which we'll get into. But he was talking about when before the game, players are pretty cordial to each other. They played in grade school and high school. They used to be teammates. They know each other. But once that ball's kicked off, it's blue versus red, scarlet versus the powder blue. So it's really intense rivalry, especially amongst the fans. And lately, I think it was 2 years ago, where certain restrictions had to be put on a lot of the tailgating because of some nonsense between some UCLA and USC hooligans. But other than that, this rivalry is as intense as it can get.
From the UCLA perspective, it couldn't have been a whole lot of fun for a lot of years. If you look at the traditional aspect of this, no offense, USC is one of the premier elite, right at the top of the hill programs, along with Notre Dame, Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama. So they have owned most of the series, and then most recently, Pete Carroll owned it, and they won 12 out of 13. But UCLA's got that two-game winning streak, and things changed quite a bit when Jim Mora hit campus, along with a quarterback by the name of Brett Hundley. So it has to feel a little bit better, and you got to look forward to it a little bit more when you know that your team's got a real shot.
Yeah, exactly. And really quickly, two of those victories in the Pete Carroll era vacated. Just want to throw that in there. But aside from that, it's been definitely.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah, it's definitely been a culture change. Mora has done wonders for this program, and it was funny to see how the Bruins got out of the starting gate a little bit slow, and so people were questioning whether he was the right man for the job, and other Bruin fans were shaking their heads like, where is this coming up? There was a hint of fire Mora after those Utah and Oregon games, and you look back and it was after that game there were some sensible Bruins that were like, it's only 2 games, there's still the rest of the season, and look, right now they're 8-2. They're in the hunt for the Pac-12 South, which ASU gave to the UCLA Bruins last week when they lost to Oregon State at Oregon State. So now UCLA controls their own destiny. If they beat USC and then beat Stanford the week after, the South Division is theirs, and they will go to the Pac-12 championship game against Oregon. Now, if they lose, then they're in a bit of trouble. So right now, as Coach Moore likes to preach, this is one of the great things that I've loved about him being at UCLA is the fact that he always preaches one game at a time. At the beginning of the season, he said if the college football playoff committee deems them worthy to be in that Final Four, then they'll be in there. If they don't think they're worthy, they won't be in there. And he reiterated that you have to go game by game. So this one is definitely big, but there's also a lot to it. You know, the South Division, this week UCLA was ranked 9th in the college football playoff rankings, so it's big. And, you know, definitely for USC too, because this is their first season off of sanctions. They're trying to get back to where they think they belong amongst the elites. I mean, you know, like you said, there's no doubt about it. They're one of the best football programs, the most historic football programs in college football history. And you know, it's hard, you know, being, as you said, during those Pete Carroll years and the overall record USC owned. So it's kind of hard to stomach that. But the last 2 years, UCLA has beaten USC, you know, behind some really good coaching of Mora and the play of Brett Hundley. And that was another thing about the Bruins, especially behind Brett Hundley. He kind of started out slow, so people were questioning whether he was ready. Has he plateaued or whatnot? He is one of the most successful quarterbacks in the country. He has the highest. I'm blanking right now. It's either the QB rating or the passing percentage, but he's up there. Aside from some stumbles that the teams have had, he's pushed this team through.
You answered two of my questions, Mike. One would be so you're a great guest in answering my questions even before I can spit them out. You definitely answered one aspect of this that makes the rivalry even more tangible, is that there's a nuts and bolts element added to it with the division races that we didn't have just a few years ago when there was a full 10 teams in the Pac-10 and had a number of other teams vying for a championship, where now you're going to figure that USC and UCLA, if their track records hold as would be expected, that they're going to butt heads for a division championship more often than not. In the way it plays out, as you alluded to, with USC at 6-2, they're going to be in the clubhouse after this game on Saturday, and then USC, Arizona, Arizona State, all at 5-2, and trying to break a tie for a championship to get to play the North winner. The other thing involving Brett Hundley, he pretty much has been an impact player and a physical specimen and made big plays since he walked on the field as a freshman for the first time. He's been that kind of dynamic player. My question was going to be, yes, and you kind of touched upon it. He's been a playmaker since he stepped on the field and an NFL prospect since day one. Is he a better quarterback than he was a year ago?
That's a tough question, because in the middle of the season you saw how the Bruins played inconsistently. Turnovers, penalties. Not all of that was Brett Hundley, but he did have some very critical turnovers, interceptions, fumbles in the Colorado, the Cal game. I think he had one in the Colorado game. A few games before that, but what's been really good in the last 2 games is how the Bruins have limited penalties. They have limited turnovers. It's just slipping my mind, but I don't think they had a turnover this last game. Sorry, I should have had that stat for you, but they are a lot more consistent than they have been all season long. The last 2 games, there have only been really 3 games where the Bruins have had a complete game, offense, defense, special teams. The first one was Arizona State, who they blew out 62-27. I think that's the proper score. Then they took out Arizona, who had a high-powered offense, and they limited them to 7 points. They technically shut out Arizona in the last 54 minutes of the game because Arizona had scored on their first drive. And then against Washington, actually UCLA did have some penalties, but it was in the second half. The good thing about that is in the Arizona game, UCLA had 7 or 8 penalties in the first half alone. And against Washington, they had 0. And what that did is help the offense move forward. They didn't have to worry about coming back or having to make up yards. The defense was a lot more consistent. They were clicking, and they brutalized Washington. Washington is going to be a good team, but right now they're in transition, and UCLA had everything clicking just in time to get a huge win in Seattle. So that's what I think is happening right now, is that they're a lot more consistent than they were at the beginning and the middle of the season, which is personally, I don't know if we were gonna ask about a prediction, but I personally think UCLA has a few more weapons, especially with Hundley, because the thing about Hundley is he doesn't have the greatest receiving core, but he has some really good players. None of the UCLA's receivers have some breakaway speed, but they have hands. They can jump high. They can get into the open field. They can get those yards after catch. So he has some weapons there. But the thing that USC really needs to worry about is Hundley's legs. He is a running specimen, and UCLA's O-line has done really well. They're one of the most consistent parts of the team, especially on offense. They have helped Hundley's running game improve. Paul Perkins is the second leading rusher in the Pac-12 behind Buck Allen from USC. So they've been doing really well running the balls, and that's one thing I think is going to really help UCLA attack USC's defense, which is very good, by the way.
Yeah, we've talked about Hundley. You mentioned the running back matchup of Buck Allen versus Paul Perkins, the two leading backs in the Pac-12. So there's a lot of star power in this matchup, apropos it being close to Hollywood. Let's talk about UCLA's defense, because the Bruins gave up points in the middle part of the season against some inferior foes like Colorado. Cal's getting better, so not so alarming there. In recent weeks, though, the defense has played much better, at least statistically. Is that due to better matchups, or do you think Myles, Jack and company is just rounding into form?
A little bit of both. It took a while for the entire team to click together, and the thing is, both offense, defense, and special teams have been very good throughout the season. They've just been inconsistent. Penalties hold them back. Turnovers, change the game. So to have them finally clicking, I think is going to continue into Saturday's game against USC. But the defense is definitely, they're having better matchups. I think they know exactly what their players are able to do. They've had some injuries and they've had to reshuffle, but everyone has. But for the defense, I think Jeff Ulbrich is, not that he's getting it. I believe he always had it, and he's had some really spectacular defensive stances. But right now, it's just, I think the biggest thing is the chemistry. They're clicking. They know exactly what they need to do, and they're really good at scheming against teams.
Yeah. So we talk about this game and look at the matchup, and to me, it's a toss-up. It is a very even matchup. I would say the one thing that UCLA has that USC doesn't is, although Cody Kessler is having a remarkable year, 29 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions, he doesn't give USC that running option that Brett Hundley can take a play that's broken down and make it a big play and keep the chains moving and break the spectacular run. That seems to be the one thing that UCLA has that USC does not. In terms of the scholarship reductions that USC's had to endure over the past couple of years, I think that's hurt the depth, so that could hurt possibly in the trenches and possibly in special teams. Yeah,
USC's offensive line. I personally think that's one of their biggest weaknesses, because they're young. They're very thin, but they've done well getting Kessler time to operate in his backfield. So if the offensive line can hold up, I think USC has a better chance. But what USC has been doing is they come out of the starting gate, on fire, but gradually per quarter their points decreased, and you kind of saw that in their last game against Cal. They had the game well in hand and were pretty much beating up on Cal, but Cal snuck in. And whether it's fatigue, play calling, whatnot, USC has had the tendency to let teams back in, and their points per quarter, you can kind of tell that it definitely is decreasing. And one of the things that UCLA has been very strong at, UCLA is 23-0 when leading at the half under Jim Mora. There have been some games where they've I think it was 2 games where they were losing at the half, but they still came back to win. One was Oregon. Obviously, they didn't win that one, but the other was Arizona. UCLA only kicked a field goal in that first half, in that penalty-laden half, and then just had a remarkable defensive stance, and UCLA was able to score in the second to take the lead in the win. So UCLA is very strong, and Jim Mora has talked about how it's not necessarily second half adjustments, but it's in-game adjustments throughout the game, because obviously you have to plan for what's happening now. If the opposition is doing something that they haven't seen before, then you got to switch it up so that they don't run all over you, or they completely shut you down. So it's kind of a toss-up about, like you said, the spread is 3 points, and it's to UCLA basically because they're at the Rose Bowl. Both teams are really good. I expect a really good game, but there are some weaknesses on both sides. One of the strengths, though, I would like to talk about is Leonard Williams, defensive lineman for USC. Absolutely fabulous. If UCLA doesn't shut him down, he's going to get in the backfield like that guy from Utah, whose name I'm blanking on, the leader in the nation in sacks. Brett Hundley got sacked 10 times in that Utah game, and Williams has he has the talent to do that. Although I think UCLA definitely will know where he's at on the field at all times. So I'm just excited to see a good game. Obviously, I want to see the Bruins win. There's a lot on the line for them, but this could go either way. If UCLA slips up, this could be interesting. And to finish off with that last point, both UCLA and USC are one of the most penalized teams in the country. So that might be an interesting factor in this game.
And could make for a long game. But I would expect the Bruins to have some type of tight end or fullback or somebody ready to chip and help out the left tackle against Mr. Leonard Williams, one of the best in the business. So you mentioned USC struggles late in games, not just against Cal, leading 31-2, and before you knew it, Cal was onside kicking to try to stay in the game and pull out a miracle. They've had their other letdowns and been able to escape against Arizona based on a missed field goal, and against Arizona State, they give up the Hail Mary when they had that locked down by a couple scores with about 5 minutes left. So USC's had its struggles closing, so regardless of the score, I'm not going to turn this game off. We're joined by Mike W.R. of Gojo Bruin, and Mike, before we let you go, we've got to get your pick.
I actually think that the Bruins are going to win by more than 3 points. I have a feeling that their defense is going to shut down USC, and one of the things that has kind of plagued USC is defending the running game. The only real game where they've had a running threat was Boston College, and they ran it down the Trojans' throat. A lot of teams in the Pac-12 are passing teams, but it seems that UCLA and Oregon, which USC has not played this year and will not play this year, are two of the most really good running teams, aside from passing as well. So if USC is not prepared for that, which I have a feeling that they might not be, this will be a little bit more blown out. My prediction that I put on GojoBruin.com was UCLA 45 to USC 21.
Yeah, and I would say you're definitely right. Although the reputation is USC-UCLA, they're pretty boys out on the West Coast, but definitely in that conference, they are the two teams that will roll up their sleeves and want to run the football and have to run the football to succeed, and that's part of the game plan, definitely. Yeah. All right, Mike, thanks so much for the information and the insight. We always love having you on. Love to get the perspective on UCLA.
Oh, thank you very much.